The crystal chandelier cast dancing shadows across the marble floor of the Grand Metropolitan Hotel as Sophia Martinez adjusted her emerald silk dress one final time. She had spent weeks planning this charity auction for children's education, her passion project that had consumed her evenings for months. Tonight was supposed to be her triumph, the culmination of her hard work to raise funds for underprivileged schools. She moved gracefully through the crowd of Chicago's elite. Her dark hair swept into an elegant chignon, her warm brown eyes sparkling with excitement. At 32, Sophia had built herself from nothing into one of the city's most successful marketing executives. But tonight, she wasn't thinking about business. Tonight was about giving back. "The silent auction items look incredible," said Emma Chin, approaching with 2 glasses of champagne. Emma had been Sophia's roommate in college and now served as her divorce attorney. "You should be proud of what you've accomplished here," Sophia smiled, accepting the glass. "I just hope we reach our goal. These kids deserve better opportunities than what they're getting." The ballroom buzzed with conversation as Chicago's wealthy mingled, their jewelry catching the light like scattered stars. Sophia had worked tirelessly to secure donations from local businesses, art galleries, and luxury brands. Everything was perfect. Then she saw him. Richard Hayes stood near the main entrance, his salt and pepper hair perfectly styled, wearing the charcoal suit she had helped him pick out for their 5th wedding anniversary. But he wasn't alone. Clinging to his arm like an expensive accessory was Victoria Sterling, a 25-year-old Instagram influencer with platinum blonde hair and a dress that cost more than most people's rent. Sophia's champagne glass trembled in her hand. She and Richard had only finalized their divorce papers 3 weeks ago. After a bitter year-long process where he had fought her on every asset, every shared memory, every piece of their life together. "Oh, honey." "No," Emma whispered, following her gaze. "What is he doing here?" "He bought a table," Sophia said quietly, her voice steady despite the storm brewing in her chest. "I saw his company name on the guest list, but I thought he would send employees." Richard's eyes found hers across the room. For a moment, something flickered in his expression. Guilt, maybe, or regret. Then Victoria whispered something in his ear, and his face hardened into the cold mask Sophia had grown to know so well during their divorce proceedings. "Ladies, gentlemen," the auctioneer called from the stage. "If we could all take our seats, we'll begin with a special announcement from one of our generous patrons." Sophia frowned. This wasn't on the program she had carefully crafted. She watched in growing dread as Richard stepped onto the stage, flashing his practiced business smile at the crowd. "Thank you all for being here tonight," Richard began, his voice carrying easily through the microphone. "As many of you know, I believe in supporting worthy causes, and education is certainly worthy. But tonight, I have an even more special announcement to share." The room fell silent, all attention focused on the stage. Sophia felt Emma's hand squeeze her arm in support. "Life is about growth," Richard continued, his eyes scanning the crowd before landing on Sophia. "It's about recognizing when relationships have run their course and having the courage to pursue true happiness." Sophia's heart began to pound. Surely he wouldn't. Not here. Not at her event. "That's why I'm thrilled to announce that Victoria and I are engaged," Richard said, pulling the young woman onto the stage beside him. Victoria giggled and held up her hand, showing off a massive diamond ring that caught the chandelier light like a disco ball. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Sophia heard someone whisper, "Isn't that his ex-wife over there?" Another voice responded, "Poor thing. How embarrassing." But Richard wasn't finished. "I know this might come as a surprise to some of you," he continued, his gaze finding Sophia again with what looked like calculated cruelty. "After all, divorce can be messy, especially when one party has difficulty accepting reality." Sophia felt the blood drain from her face. Around her, she could sense the crowd's discomfort. The way conversations had stopped, the way people were stealing glances at her. "But I've learned that sometimes you have to make difficult decisions. For your own happiness," Richard went on. "Sometimes you realize that what you thought was love was really just settling." "Victoria has shown me what true partnership looks like." Victoria beamed at the crowd, clearly loving the attention. Richard is such an amazing man, she gushed into the microphone. I feel so lucky that he chose me. I mean, I know it must have been hard for his ex-wife to let go of someone so wonderful. But sometimes you have to face facts about where you belong in life. The comment hit Sophia like a physical blow. The implication was clear. She hadn't been good enough, hadn't deserved Richard's love, had been holding him back from his true happiness. Emma started to rise from her seat. Fury written across her face, but Sophia caught her arm. Don't, she whispered. Don't make it worse. This is your event, Emma hissed. He has no right to hijack it like this. But Sophia was already standing, her head held high despite the whispers and stares. She had two choices, crumble publicly or maintain her dignity. She chose dignity. Congratulations, she said clearly, her voice carrying across the now silent ballroom. I hope you find all the happiness you're looking for. Her words were gracious, but those who knew her could hear the steel underneath. She turned to address the crowd directly. And now, if we could return to the reason we're all here tonight, she continued, these children need our support. And I believe that's more important than any personal announcements. The crowd shifted uncomfortably. Some people looking ashamed of their obvious curiosity about the drama unfolding before them. A few began to clap, and soon the applause grew, directed at Sophia's grace under pressure, but the damage was done. Richard had succeeded in making her charity event about his personal life, about his new relationship, about her failure as a wife. She could see it in the pitying looks, the whispered conversations. The way some people seemed to view her as an object of sympathy, rather than the accomplished woman who had organized this entire evening. As the auction began, Sophia moved through the motions with practiced professionalism. She smiled at donors, thanked sponsors, and celebrated each successful bid. But inside, she was crumbling. Richard had taken something precious from her tonight, something beyond money or property. He had taken her moment of triumph and twisted it into his opportunity to publicly declare her inadequacy. During the paddle race for the evening's biggest cause, education scholarships for single mothers returning to school, Richard raised his paddle for the maximum amount. The irony wasn't lost on anyone, least of all Sophia. Here was a man who had just humiliated his ex-wife at her own charity event, now trying to look magnanimous by supporting single mothers. What a generous contribution, the auctioneer announced. Mr. Hayes, would you like to say a few words about why this cause is important to you? Richard took the microphone again. Sophia braced herself for another attack, disguised as philanthropy. Education is the key to helping people recognize their true potential, he said smoothly. Sometimes we all need assistance finding our proper place in the world. I believe everyone deserves the chance to discover where they truly belong. The words were carefully chosen, seemingly innocent, but Sophia heard the real message. He was suggesting that she needed help finding her proper place in life. Her place hadn't been beside him. The evening continued with forced normalcy. But Sophia could feel the change in the atmosphere. What should have been her celebration had become a spectacle. People were no longer talking about the cause or the impressive donations. They were talking about the drama, about Richard's new engagement, about how uncomfortable the whole situation had been. As the event wound down and guests began to leave, Sophia found herself standing alone near the silent auction tables. Surrounded by the remnants of what was supposed to be her perfect evening, she had raised more money than ever before for the charity. But the victory felt hollow. Emma appeared beside her with their coats. You handled that with more grace than he deserved, she said firmly. But we both know this isn't over. Sophia nodded, suddenly feeling exhausted. He made his point. Everyone in Chicago's social circle now knows that I wasn't. Enough for Richard Hayes. That Victoria is everything I wasn't. That's not what they saw tonight, Emma insisted. They saw a petty man trying to humiliate his ex-wife, and a woman who refused to give him the satisfaction of breaking down. But as they walked to the parking garage, passing groups of guests still discussing the evening's events in hushed tones, Sophia couldn't shake the feeling that Richard had won. He had what he wanted, a young, beautiful fiancée who made him feel important. And he had publicly established the narrative that Sophia had been the problem in their marriage. The worst part was the tiny voice in her head that wondered if he was right. If she had somehow been holding him back, if she had failed as a wife, if she truly wasn't worthy of the kind of love she had always dreamed of finding as she drove home to her small apartment. So different from the sprawling house she had once shared with Richard. Sophia couldn't know that her lowest moment was about to become the catalyst for the greatest change of her life. Sometimes we have to be broken completely before we can be rebuilt into something stronger. Something truer to who we were always meant to be. The city lights blurred through her tears as she finally allowed herself to cry. Not just for the public humiliation, but for the death of her dreams and the beginning of something she couldn't yet imagine. 3 months had passed since the charity gala incident, and Sophia Martinez had thrown herself into rebuilding her life with quiet determination. She had moved into a cozy brownstone apartment in Lincoln Park, started her own marketing consultancy, and was slowly learning to fill the silence that had once been occupied by Richard's constant criticism. The Riverside Art Gallery was hosting its monthly exhibition opening, and Emma had practically dragged Sophia there on a crisp October evening. The gallery walls were adorned with contemporary paintings that seemed to capture light and emotion in ways that made Sophia's heart ache with their beauty. "You need to get out more," Emma had insisted. "You can't spend every evening working on client proposals and eating takeout." Sophia stood before a particularly striking painting of a woman dancing alone in a field of sunflowers. Her face turned toward the sky. There was something about the figure's posture, the way she seemed to embrace solitude rather than suffer from it, that spoke to Sophia's current journey. "She looks free, doesn't she?" The voice came from behind her, deep and warm with a slight accent she couldn't quite place. Sophia turned to find a man in his late 30s studying the same painting. He was tall and lean, with dark hair that looked like he had run his fingers through it, and intelligent gray eyes that seemed to see more than they revealed. "She does," Sophia agreed, surprised by how easily she responded to this stranger. Like she's dancing because she wants to, not because anyone is watching. He smiled, and something in his expression made her feel unexpectedly understood. "I'm Julian Blackwood," he said. Extending his hand, "Sophia Martinez," she replied, noting the strength in his handshake. The way he looked directly into her eyes without the calculating assessment she had grown accustomed to from men in Chicago's social circles. "Marketing executive who organized the children's education fundraiser last month," Julian said, and Sophia's heart sank. Here it comes, she thought. The pity, the awkward references to Richard's public humiliation of her. But Julian's expression remained genuinely interested. "I heard it was the most successful fundraiser in the organization's history. The scholarship program you developed is already changing lives." Sophia blinked in surprise. Most people only remembered the drama, not the actual cause. "You know about the scholarship program?" "I make it my business to know about effective philanthropy," Julian said simply. "I run the Blackwood Foundation. We focus on education initiatives, particularly for underserved communities." They walked through the gallery together, their conversation flowing with surprising ease. Julian asked thoughtful questions about her marketing strategies, her passion for education reform, and her thoughts on the artwork surrounding them. He didn't ask about her divorce. He didn't reference the gossip that still occasionally surfaced at social events. "What brings you to Chicago?" Sophia asked as they paused before a sculpture that seemed to twist skyward like Frozen. "Music. I'm considering opening a foundation office here," Julian explained. "I've been traveling for months, looking at different cities, trying to find the right community to invest in long term." There was something about the way he said it that made Sophia suspect he was searching for more than just a business location. "And what have you found?" Julian looked at her directly, his gray eyes serious. "I'm beginning to think I've found exactly what I was looking for." The intensity of his gaze made Sophia's cheeks warm, but before she could respond, Emma appeared with 2 glasses of wine and a curious expression. "I see you've met someone interesting," Emma said with the subtle smile of a friend who approved of what she was seeing. "Julian Blackwood." "This is my best friend and attorney, Emma Chen," Sophia said, grateful for the interruption that allowed her to collect herself. "The Emma Chen who specializes in nonprofit law?" Julian asked, his face lighting up. "I've heard incredible things about your work with community organizations." As Emma and Julian discussed legal frameworks for charitable foundations, Sophia observed this man who had appeared in her life so unexpectedly. He spoke with passion about his work, listened intently to others' opinions, and carried himself with a quiet confidence that never felt aggressive or dominating. He was everything Richard had pretended to be, but never was.
Ow.
Would you be interested in seeing some of the communities where your foundation might make the biggest impact? Sophia found herself asking when their conversation turned to local education needs. Julian's smile was immediate and genuine. I would be very interested in that. When are you free? They spent the following Saturday touring schools and underserved neighborhoods, visiting community centers, and talking with local educators about their biggest challenges. Julian asked insightful questions, took notes, and treated every person they met with the same respect he would show to a corporate board member at Roosevelt Elementary, where paint was peeling from the walls and textbooks were falling apart. Julian watched Sophia interact with the children. She had brought art supplies, and soon she was sitting cross-legged on the floor, helping a group of third graders create colorful paintings while explaining basic marketing concepts through storytelling. You're a natural teacher, Julian said as they walked back to his car. I wanted to be a teacher originally, Sophia admitted, but my parents convinced me that marketing would be more financially stable. What would you teach if you could teach anything? Sophia considered the question seriously. Creative problem solving. How to look at challenges and see opportunities. How to believe in your own worth regardless of what others say about you. Julian stopped walking and turned to face her. That last one sounds personal. For a moment, Sophia considered deflecting, giving him the polite non-answer she had perfected over the past few months. Instead, she found herself being honest. My ex-husband spent years convincing me that I wasn't quite good enough, wasn't quite worthy of the life we were building together. When he left me for someone younger, he made sure everyone knew that I had been the problem in our marriage. He sounds like a fool, Julian said quietly. Everyone says that, but part of me wonders if he was right. Maybe I was holding him back. Maybe I really wasn't enough. Julian was quiet for a long moment, and Sophia worried she had shared too much too soon. Then he spoke, his voice gentle but firm. I've spent the day watching you inspire children, advocate for communities that need support, and demonstrate more genuine leadership than most CEOs I know. If your ex-husband couldn't see your worth, that says everything about his character and nothing about yours. Tears threatened. But they were different from the tears she had shed after the charity gala. These were tears of recognition, a feeling truly seen for the first time in years. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for showing me what this city has to offer, Julian replied. I think Chicago might be exactly where I need to be. Their relationship developed slowly over the following weeks. Julian would appear at her office with coffee and questions about local community needs. Sophia would suggest restaurants where they could discuss foundation strategies. They attended cultural events together, always under the pretense of Julian learning about the city. But both of them knew something deeper was growing between them. Julian was patient with her healing process, never pushing for more than she was ready to give. When she flinched at public displays of affection, remembering how Richard had used such moments to control her, Julian simply took her hand and waited until she relaxed. When she apologized unnecessarily for expressing strong opinions, Julian would gently remind her that her thoughts were valuable and worthy of space. One evening, as they walked along Lake Michigan, after a foundation board meeting, Julian stopped and turned to face her. Sophia, I need you to know something, he said, his expression serious. I didn't come to Chicago looking for a relationship. I came here running from one, actually. My ex-fiancée was everything that looked right on paper, but being with her felt like wearing a costume that never quite fit. Sophia waited, sensing there was more, but meeting you has changed everything. You've shown me what it feels like to be with someone who sees the real me, who shares my values, who makes me want to be better not because I'm not good enough, but because love should inspire growth. Julian, she began, but he held up a gentle hand. I'm not asking for anything you're not ready to give. I just need you to know that when I look at you, I see someone extraordinary, someone worthy of love that builds rather than diminishes. someone who deserves a partner who celebrates her strength instead of fearing it. For the first time since her divorce, Sophia felt the possibility of being truly loved for who she was, rather than who someone wanted her to become. The feeling was terrifying and wonderful in equal measure. "I'm scared," she admitted. "So am I," Julian said with a smile. "But maybe that's how we know it matters." As winter melted into spring, their relationship deepened into something neither had experienced before. Julian established the Chicago office of the Blackwood Foundation with Sophia as a key consultant, a professional collaboration enhancing their personal connection. They were building something together based on mutual respect, shared values, and the kind of love that made both of them more themselves rather than less. The invitation arrived on cream-colored paper with elegant gold lettering. Richard Hayes and Victoria. Sterling request your presence at their engagement celebration. Sophia stared at it for a long moment before handing it to Julian, who was reading the morning paper at her kitchen table. "Are you going?" he asked, his tone carefully neutral. "I don't know," Sophia admitted. "Part of me wants to ignore it completely, but another part thinks maybe I need to face this, to prove to myself that I've really moved on." Julian set down his newspaper and reached for her hand. "What does your heart tell you? That I'm not the same woman who was humiliated at that charity gala 8 months ago? That maybe it's time to show him that?" The engagement party was being held at the Windy City Country Club, Chicago's most exclusive venue. Sophia chose her outfit carefully, a midnight blue dress that hugged her curves elegantly, her natural hair styled in a way that framed her face beautifully, and the diamond earrings that had been her grandmother's. She looked sophisticated, confident, and genuinely happy. Julian looked distinguished in his tailored black suit, and as they walked into the country club together, Sophia noticed the way other guests' eyes followed them. She had forgotten what it felt like to be part of a couple that drew admiration rather than pity. The party was everything Richard would have wanted: ostentatious, expensive, and designed to impress. Ice sculptures, a string quartet, servers carrying champagne that cost more per bottle than most people spent on groceries in a month. Victoria floated through the crowd in a white dress that cost more than Sophia's car, showing off her engagement ring to anyone who would look. "There she is," Emma whispered, appearing at Sophia's elbow. "The woman of the hour." "She looks nervous." Sophia followed Emma's gaze and realized her friend was right. Victoria's smile was too bright, her laugh too loud. She kept glancing around the room as if looking for threats. "Sophia Martinez," a familiar voice called out. "I heard you were back on the social scene." Margaret Ashford, one of Chicago's most notorious gossips, approached with the predatory smile of someone who smelled drama. "And who is this handsome gentleman?" "Julian Blackwood," he said, extending his hand with the easy confidence of someone who had nothing to prove. "I run the Blackwood Foundation." Margaret's eyes widened slightly. The Blackwood name carried weight even in Chicago's elite circles. "The Blackwood Foundation. How wonderful. I've heard such good things about your education initiatives." Before Margaret could probe further, Richard himself appeared, Victoria clinging to his arm like an expensive accessory. Up close, Sophia could see the strain around his eyes. The way his smile seemed forced. "Sophia," he said with false heartiness, "so glad you could make it. And this must be your date." "Julian Blackwood," Julian introduced himself, his tone polite but not particularly warm. "Blackwood," Richard repeated, and Sophia could see him mentally calculating net worth and social standing. "I don't think we've met." "No, we haven't," Julian replied simply. Offering no additional information, the silence stretched uncomfortably until Victoria giggled nervously. "Well, this is nice. Richard has told me so much about you, Sophia. It's sweet that you could come to celebrate our happiness." There was something in Victoria's tone, a slight edge that suggested the sweetness was manufactured. Sophia studied the younger woman more carefully and noticed what she had missed before. The way Victoria's eyes darted between Richard and Julian, the barely concealed anxiety beneath her perfect makeup. "Congratulations," Sophia said genuinely. "I hope you find all the happiness you're looking for." "Oh, we will," Victoria said quickly. "Richard has been so wonderful, planning this whole party, making sure everyone knows how committed we are to each other." Julian's hand found the small of Sophia's back. A subtle gesture of support that didn't go unnoticed by Richard, whose jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Blackwood Foundation, Richard said suddenly, as if the name had finally registered. Didn't you just donate $50 million to education reform in the Midwest? We believe in investing in communities that show real potential for growth. Julian replied diplomatically. Richard's expression shifted as he realized he was standing next to someone whose wealth and influence dwarfed his own. That's incredibly generous. We should talk about potential partnerships. My tech company has several educational applications in development. I'm sure Sophia could put you in touch with the right people if there's genuine merit to your proposals, Julian said smoothly. She's been instrumental in helping us identify the most impactful investment opportunities. Sophia felt a surge of pride at Julian's words, not because he was defending her, but because he was publicly recognizing her professional expertise. It was so different from Richard's constant need to diminish her accomplishments. Sophia's working with you, Richard asked, surprise evident in his voice. She's one of the most insightful strategists I've ever worked with, Julian said simply. The foundation is lucky to have her expertise. Victoria's grip on Richard's arm tightened, and Sophia suddenly understood what she was seeing. The younger woman was intimidated, not just by Sophia's presence, but by the evidence of her success, her new relationship, her obvious happiness. That's wonderful, Victoria said with forced brightness. I'm so glad you found something to keep you busy after. Well, after everything, the comment was intended to sting. To remind everyone present that Sophia was the cast-off ex-wife, making do with whatever scraps of purpose she could find. But it fell flat because everyone in the conversation could see that Sophia hadn't just landed on her feet. She had soared. I should thank you, actually, Sophia said, her voice clear and confident. The divorce forced me to rediscover who I was when I wasn't trying to be what someone else needed me to be. It led me to work that truly matters and to understanding what genuine partnership looks like. She looked at Julian as she said this last part, and the love in his eyes was unmistakable. Around them, other guests had begun to pay attention to the conversation, drawn by some invisible shift in energy. That's sweet, Richard said with false casualness. Though I hope you're not moving too fast. Rebound relationships can be complicated. It was meant to be cutting, suggestion that Sophia was desperately clinging to the first man who showed her attention. But Julian's response was immediate and devastating in its quiet power. There's nothing rebound about recognizing exceptional when you find it, he said, his eyes never leaving Sophia's face. Some people spend their whole lives searching for what we've found together. The statement hung in the air, a declaration that was both romantic and pointed. Richard's face darkened as he realized he had been publicly outmaneuvered by a man who possessed everything he had always wanted. True wealth, genuine class, and the love of a woman worth having. Victoria seemed to sense the shift in dynamics and pulled Richard away with some excuse about greeting other guests. As they moved through the crowd, Sophia noticed other conversations pausing. Other eyes following the couple with expressions that ranged from curiosity to barely concealed pity. Emma reappeared with fresh champagne and a satisfied smile. Did you see Margaret Ashford's face when Julian mentioned the $50 million donation? And the way Victoria keeps looking back at you like you might steal her thunder? I feel almost sorry for her, Sophia said, and she meant it. She has no idea what she's really gotten herself into. Richard made his choice, Emma said firmly. And you made yours. Look around, Sophia. Look at how people are responding to you tonight. Sophia did look around and realized Emma was right. The pitying glances and whispered gossip from months before had been replaced by something else entirely. Respect, maybe even admiration. She wasn't the discarded ex-wife anymore. She was the successful woman who had built something beautiful from the ashes of her old life. Later that evening, as they danced to the string quartet's rendition of a classic jazz standard, Julian pulled her closer. How do you feel? He asked quietly. Free, Sophia said, and meant it completely. For the first time in years, I feel absolutely free. Good, Julian said, spinning her gently, because I have something I want to ask you. He stopped dancing and reached into his jacket pocket. withdrawing a small velvet box. Sophia's breath caught as he dropped to one knee in the middle of the dance floor. "Sophia Martinez," he said, his voice carrying clearly in the suddenly quiet room. "You've shown me what it means to love someone not for what they can give you, but for who they are. Will you marry me?" The ring was perfect, elegant, timeless, chosen with thought and care rather than to impress others. But more than that, the proposal was everything Richards had never been. It was public but intimate, confident but humble. A celebration rather than a transaction. "Yes," Sophia said, her voice strong and clear. "Yes, absolutely yes." As Julian slipped the ring onto her finger and rose to kiss her, the room erupted in applause. Through the crowd of well-wishers, Sophia caught a glimpse of Richard's face, pale and stunned, and Victoria beside him, tears threatening to ruin her perfect makeup. But for the first time since her divorce, Sophia felt no satisfaction in Richard's obvious distress. She felt only joy, pure and uncomplicated. At the future stretching out before her, 6 months later, Sophia Martinez became Sophia Blackwood in a ceremony that was everything her first wedding hadn't been: genuine, joyful, and surrounded by people who loved them for who they really were. The Blackwood Foundation thrived under their joint leadership, changing lives in communities across the country, and Richard Hayes. He married Victoria Sterling in a lavish ceremony that made headlines for all the wrong reasons, including the bride's tearful breakdown during the reception and the groom's obvious discomfort throughout the proceedings. But that's another story entirely. Sophia's story was about second chances, about finding the courage to rebuild, and about discovering that sometimes the worst thing that happens to us becomes the catalyst for the best thing we never knew we were looking for.